So hello all and welcome. And I am the realist philosopher, also known as the bachelor philosopher, or just plain the realist. So how y'all doing today? Hope you're all doing good, fine, and well. I'm doing okay. I'm doing all right. In today's video, I wanted to talk about the subject of apathy. What it is, how it's employed, that kind of thing. Now, my reason for this is because I'm seeing a lot of content producers out there within the Manosphere banding about the word apathy. You have to not care. Apathy is key. You want to win, you gotta not care. Not caring is how you win. If you can't detach yourself, if you care, well, it'll drive you nuts. You have to not care. That's how you win the game, by not playing. That kind of thing. By the way, the fact that you're making content to talk about not playing, not participating, kind of contradicts your prior message about being apathetic by not playing, not participating in the first place. Since the very act of producing content means you care, otherwise you wouldn't produce content to say you don't care and that other people should not care. Anyhow, I wanted to address this often misunderstood subject and help you, the viewer, be better able to spot and expose the fraudsters out there. You know, people who like to discuss the subject, and they do so because it's popular within the Manosphere, and it plays on a lot of stereotypical misunderstandings of Stoicism, another very popular but misunderstood subject. Because, you know, throwing about Stoicism and talking about apathy, well, it can sound very profound to those who are rather uncritical. You know, the idea itself, it's simple, it's easy, just don't care, baby, and that's it. It's like a cure-all, right? It's great in theory, it's extremely appealing, and it doesn't really exist anywhere. But it sounds good if you don't think about it too much, right? Anyhow, let's get into it, shall we? So, apathy. It's a very misunderstood thing. Many people who tout themselves as experts on Stoicism like to talk about this mindset, this state of being, as a virtue unto itself. But they do so without going into particulars a lot of the time. Instead, they'll speak in broad generalities, which is part of how you know they don't know what they're talking about, and they're simply spouting popular talking points. You see, apathy is a state which is willful in nature. It's a form of detachment that doesn't generally occur naturally. And in most cases, it's a state that one chooses to be in when presented with very specific circumstances and or situations. It's prescriptive in nature, meaning it's an ought, meaning it's an assessment as to what would be best in a given situation. Should I choose to be apathetic in this situation in regards to thoughts and feelings, or should I not? Essentially, it's a tool of the mind, you could say, one that's employed when appropriate and or required. It's not a virtue, though. Essentially, apathy is a tool of the mind, you could say. A tool of the mind that is employed to achieve a certain state of being, one that is employed when appropriate and or required. However, it's not a virtue. Virtues are things like loyalty, discipline, duty, things that once you achieve them govern how you comport yourself on a daily basis and are employed in all things at all times, or at the very least more often than not. Thereby you can say, well, I am a disciplined person. I have duty. I am loyal, because the vast majority of the time you are these things. And unlike apathy, virtues are not dependent upon the circumstances in regards to whether or not they ought or ought not be employed. Meanwhile, apathy is, generally speaking, dependent upon the circumstance in regards to whether it ought or ought not be employed. I hope that makes some sense. There are some situations, by the way, where detachment is indeed a good thing. For example, combat. When you're fighting another human being, or an animal, or whatever you might be facing in a mortal situation where your life's at stake, emotions and thoughts in and of themselves, well, especially emotions, they tend to get in the way, cloud the mind, kill your ability to think, or even react in a natural, trained way without thinking. That's something the Japanese like to call mushin, or no mind. In those situations, apathy is a wonderful state of being to be in. When no mind is given to one's own life, i.e. fear of death, one doesn't hesitate to do what's required. You see, in mortal combat, hesitation is deadly and will, more likely than not, lead to your death. So that's one scenario where apathy, or absence of feeling, or caring about one's own safety, well-being, in the moment of said confrontation with another human being, can lead to clearer, more correct course of action, and the ability to take said action without any impediment from emotion. So, where is apathy not useful? Well, when deciding whether or not to even fight in the first place. You see, to go to war, you must care, otherwise you wouldn't be entering into it, now would you? Now, of course, you could argue that you come to the conclusion as to whether or not to even go to war can occur from a 100% dispassionate point of view, meaning based solely on logic and reason. You still would have to have a goal, a purpose, a want, a desire in regards to whatever outcome you foresee in the first place to even enter into that war, to even fight, to even put yourself in that situation. Otherwise, you wouldn't go to war. Now, would you? The very act of doing this thing, doing, means you care one way or another. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing it. Hence, you are not 100% apathetic. And this is yet another way you can spot the fakes, the frauds, the phonies, the grifters out there within the manosphere by their lack of understanding of apathy, how it has multiple aspects to it, and their use of it instead as a cure-all prescriptive measure within a given space without paying any attention to specific situations that might occur within said space. Anyhow, one can be totally apathetic in a given situation, say when you're in combat, as they can be in a state of mind where their subconscious takes over from the conscious and governs their actions. Hence, in that moment, in that situation, at that point in time, they technically are not acting via the conscious mind. But that's very case specific, and they didn't get into that situation by being of no mind, no thought, no care, no concern. They're there because they care. And the apathy itself exists within the confines of a very specific situation where they're employing action in the most effective way possible, and that apathy of thought and feeling is a direct response to said situation and only exists within that given scenario. So, while one can be apathetic emotionally, or of no thought, no mind in a given circumstance, to take any action whatsoever requires one to have a thought or feeling that spurs action, i.e., they must care. In truth, for someone to enter into any action, they can't be totally, completely apathetic in regards to whatever it is they're taking action for. It's simply not possible. If you take action, then you care. The very act of acting upon a thought or feeling for any given purpose means one is not apathetic in regards to said purpose. The action itself was initiated and is fueled by some underlying care, concern, or desire to achieve a goal. That's not apathy. So, as you can see, there's a lot of nuance in regards to how one comports oneself in the real world, as well as differences between things like virtues, values, and states of being. And there's another way you can spot the fakes, the frauds, the phonies, the grifters out there in the manosphere by how they tend to intermingle these different categories, and they tend to conflate these things, often using them interchangeably or in some overarching, unnuanced general manner. Also, unlike virtues, apathy is a state of being that may or may not serve one's well-being. You see, it may or may not be the correct state to adopt. It depends on the situation. One may or may not be acting in a virtuous manner when employing a detached mindset. One may or may not be acting loyally if they choose an emotionally detached state of being. One may or may not be acting honorably in a situation where they chose a state of total detachment. Apathy is a tool of the mind. It's a willful state of being, and it works in service to or against virtues and the values one holds. It's not a virtue in and of itself. Nor does it become a virtue simply because it's employed in a given situation where the outcome proves to be the correct one. No. Virtues are still virtues and are merely served by one state of being. You're serving virtue or you're serving vice. And while a state of being may allow one to achieve a desired outcome, the state itself that you are in is not a virtue, and it shouldn't be conflated with such. Anyhow, as you can see, there's a lot more to the matter of things such as states of being, virtues, vices, and values. It's not a simple matter at all. And that's how you can easily spot the grifters out there within the manosphere. These folks, they like to parrot philosophers like myself, but they'll only partially parrot, as they lack the background, the long, intense study, and the thought behind any ideas that they have, because those ideas were not ideas they came up with themselves. They're just talking points they got from someone else. And they also lack the work-based understanding of the subject to come to any specific, nuanced conclusions on whatever matter they're commenting on. Instead, they like to generalize heavily and don't make a lot of distinctions, either for categories or situations. So you have to be wary of generalizations that someone gives, which invoke stoicism and apathy, some kind of overarching goods, or who avoid specifics of any kind. Tools such as one's state of being are good, bad, or neutral in regards to our well-being, and whatever goals we wish to achieve. It's not based on some universality, but instead it's situational, and the good or the ill of a certain state of mind, state of being, is determined by whether or not such a chosen state does or does not serve our well-being or the well-being of others, depending upon whatever goal you're pursuing. And as for moral or ethical considerations, that's another matter entirely, and it's best left to another video to discuss such things. Anyhow, I hope this clears things up on the matter of apathy, not only as to what it is and when one should or should not employ it, but also as to how it interacts with the virtues and vices of the world. I also hope this helps you understand that states of being and virtues are completely different categories, and how to easily spot people who don't know what they're talking about, because one of the things they tend to do, lacking understanding, is to conflate these categories. So, apathy either serves virtue or it serves vice. Virtues are not always good and can themselves be used for immoral pursuits. After all, morality is not what defines a virtue, just what they are being employed to achieve. In this sense, virtues and apathy are similar in that both can be employed for good or for ill. In that sense, they have something in common. But again, a more in-depth discussion on the topic of virtues, it really does require its own video. Anyhow, on that note, I'm going to digress. I am the Realist Philosopher, also known as the Bachelor Philosopher. Please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Don't forget to follow me on alt tech and social media. My social media monikers are at the bottom of the page, and my alt tech are at the top. And on that note, I wish you all a good and pleasant day. Take care.